from there it was J.K. Simmons, Miles Teller. The holy grail for me was Robert De Niro. I got to meet Bob. His name is Robert De Niro, but nobody ever calls him Robert. Everyone always calls him Bob. But when he turned the corner, I said, oh my God, it's like a surprise party. Most people say, oh my God, get down, here he is. And he came in, and honestly, Chawathe, he was so sweet. He just had a big smile on his face. I asked him about the documentary he did about his dad. And I said, again, for a guy who's so private and so famously remote, you really dedicate a lot of time to telling the story about your dad. It's a fascinating documentary on HBO, and your dad was a famous king. In the past, you'd have these mid-tier pictures. This as a director, you'd have these quiz shows and ordinary people. And now it's either a $2 million movie or a $200 million movie. When I made the movie, I realized it wasn't very good. And, he was very kind about it, but didn't have any visual flair or panache. I was very humiliated.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Kingdom Dreams podcast, The Making of Stories. I'm your host, Jawad Mir. Today, my guest is Adnan Virk, who is a TV host who has worked on ESPN, MLB. He's had a podcast on movies over the years, as well as an author now who has come out with his most recent book, Cinephile, which is a collection of interviews that he's had with people like Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and a whole bunch of others, along with his own personal stories from podcasts, the knowledge and the information that he gained during that podcast, and how he just loves films. And I had a great time chatting with him because, I'm in a similar boat. I'm a film director, but also doing a podcast because I love movies. I love talking about movies. So it was a really, really cool conversation, great personality, full of energy, full of life. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Adnan Virk. We'll get to your book. We'll get to your podcast. I would just love to know your origins in terms of, you're obviously in the ESPN world and TV and all that. What prompted you, that moment in your life, whether it was as a child or a young adult, that put this bug in your head that this is what you want to do?
Well, I always just loved movies. So when I was a kid, I thought it would be so cool to be a director. I adore Martin Scorsese. There's an entire chapter in which I went through all of Scorsese's 26 feature films. Of course, he's done marvelous documentaries as well. But I went through every single one of his movies. And that to me really felt like when I got hit by a lightning bolt when I first got to watch Goodfellas when I was 12. And I wanted to be like a Muslim Martin Scorsese. I wanted to go make movies. But I realized being the son of immigrant parents, that was going to be a tough sell. They're not going to pay, at the time, $40,000, for film school. So what I thought I would do is I went to school for radio and television arts, because one of my favorite books is Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, great book about the directors of the 70s. And Robert Altman actually started in television, then went and made MASH, those other movies. So obviously Spielberg, Lucas, Coppola, that whole generation. So I said, okay, I'll do what Altman did. I'll direct television and then segue into movies. So what happened was in my second year there, I did a short film with one of my favorite teachers, Billy Nobles, who's a great guy. And we got along well. He'd call me Hollywood Virk because he'd make references that only I understood. Like he talked about the tracking shot in Touch of Evil, which I'd actually seen. Of course, the great Orson Welles movies. But, when I made the movie, I realized it wasn't very good. And, he was very kind about it, but didn't have any visual flair or panache. And I was very humiliated. And I realized that to be a director, you have to have that visual sense, right? You walk in a room, you know where you're going to block, where you're going to cut, editing, all that kind of stuff. And I just didn't have it. But I'm a very verbal person. Obviously I love to write. So I said that might make more sense. So my backup plan was, since I love sports so much, I said I could be a sportscaster. And I got an internship at TSN, which is the equivalent of ESPN in Canada. And in fact, my guidance counselor, I have to give him great credit, Dennis Shula, when I was looking for places to go, I went to a very small high school, 800 people, small town, Odessa, Ontario, 5,000 people in Eastern Ontario. He said to me, you should go to the school, radio and television arts, because you like media, you like all those types of things. And from there, you can kind of find your path. The only other place I applied to was Carleton for journalism. So he said, you're a verbal person. You're really great with public speaking. You're a good writer. Like, you'll find something in that venue. So I'm always grateful to Mr. Shula for suggesting that. And like I said, I interned at TSN, worked 2 years there behind the scenes, finished college, worked there for a couple more years, sent out my demo tape, familiar story for many people, lots of rejections along the way. Eventually, just like an actor, you just need one. And eventually I got one, and it was Bollywood Boulevard. And I told the guy running at Stamford Falcus, I said, my family's Pakistani, but I really don't know much about Indian movies. He said, no, you'll be fine. We have a guy who's from Mumbai, Nalam Bakhle. He knows these films. He can help you with the pronunciations of the movies and stuff. I talked to some people at TSN. They all said, you're a great guy. You really know your stuff. I did that for a year and a half. And then a floor director named Nick Choni, I'm always indebted to. He said to me, what's your deal? I don't understand why you're here. Clearly, these people, it's like a multicultural channel. There's like the Polish division, the Italian division, the Greek, the South Asian. Like, you're not here because of Bollywood movies. You're clearly like a broadcaster. And I said, yeah, I wanted to be a sportscaster, but I applied to 6 jobs, whatever it was, and I never got a sniff. So he said, my cousin's starting a job. His name is Anthony Ciccione. He's starting a 24/7 sports network. It's the equivalent of headline news. It's called Headline Sports. So Anthony called me and said, I saw some of your stuff. It's okay. I think you need a little bit of practice, but Nick says you're a great guy. So let's keep in touch. A few months later, Anthony called me, said, I think you're ready. Did an audition, got the job, and away we go.
Amazing. Well, I'm from Toronto as well, so the TSN and Sportsnet and all that stuff is very relevant to me, and it's really cool to hear that how, there's certain people that were guiding you because that's always very important. I think that happens throughout your life, not just as a kid, but even like, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. There's always some force that needs to sort of pivot your direction in case something is not going right. So good for you, man. That's a really, really fascinating story. It's really cool to hear.
Yeah, people often ask, who's your mentor? And I'm like, there's not like one specific person. There's just been so many people who are helpful along the way. And it doesn't always have to be somebody who's, in a position of power or leadership. Like I said, Nick Ciccione's making, $12 an hour. He just happened to see somebody who was perhaps how he could help him. You never know where help is going to come from. When people ask me for feedback for young aspiring broadcasters, I always say, never know where help will come from. Be nice to everyone, treat everyone with respect, remember people's names. And, hopefully with a little bit of hard work and good luck, things will come your way.
Definitely. So now that you've become a broadcaster, you've done this over the years, and when did you become an official, like on ESPN? What year was it?
Yeah, so 2004, 2002, I was on there at Bollywood Boulevard and Omni. I started at The Score, which is a sports network that I was talking about in 03, and then I was there until 09. So 6 years I worked at The Score as a sportscaster, primarily doing the Raptors and doing basketball, but I covered all sports. I've always loved all sports. And then
Mm,
I went to MLSC, which is Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. I did the Leafs and the Raptors for a year. And from there, I got my big break at ESPN. So that was 2010. I was 31, married, just one son at the time. And then I worked at ESPN for 9 years. So May of 2010, 15 years ago now.
nice. You think Leafs will ever win the playoffs?
I don't think so. It's
I
funny.
don't think so either.
Oh, it's such a great, passionate fan base, and they love their hockey so much. But when the playoffs come, it's like the pressure gets a little too much for them. And even the last couple of years, like they've been the underdog. Like Florida is a better team, but
Yeah.
times, as you know, that Toronto's been the underachiever, and the difference between winning and losing is so finite in hockey. And unfortunately, since 1967, they've been waiting. I think they're gonna have to wait a little while longer.
Yeah, I used to follow it like a religion in the mid to late 90s when Sundin, Caberlet, and all those, and when they lost with North Carolina
Yes.
in Game 6, I would remember, right? But yeah, it was like literally I would pray, like I would say I would do Nuffle and all that stuff, right? But now after that, after the lockout, I just lost interest, and I picked it up again a couple of years ago. But again, it's the same thing, right? You just
Yeah.
lose in the same rounds, just like the same time before, but.
Yeah, there's the diehard fans who don't miss a game, don't miss a second. There's the next level who are just fans of Toronto, right? They want to see the city do well. And then there's those, as you call them, the bandwagon jumpers who will get on once they get good. So you're probably in the category 3 now. Once you guys
Yeah.
actually, if you can get to a semifinal, if you get to Stanley Cup final, then I mean, that's what I say. I tell people, I said it's not even because, as you said, Carolina, that was a semifinal, conference final.
Yeah.
93, 92, those were conference finals. Just to even make the Stanley Cup final, like Toronto has not done that since
Yeah,
19.
yeah, yeah.
If they lost the Stanley Cup final, just to see the city, I wish they could at least get to experience that because it's like no one else.
I remember when they defeated Ottawa by, I don't know what year was this. I would like to guess early 2000. They were
Yeah,
down 3-2 in the series and they won 4-3. And I was coming from Ryerson. I was taking some film courses and I was walking to Union, and that's when the game finished. And the amount of people that came out of Union just because of that series
yeah.
was crazy. I mean, imagine when Stanley Cup victory happens, right? So,
That's what I tell people about. Forget about if you win or lose. Just the anticipation of the Toronto Maple Leafs are playing in a Stanley Cup final game, and it's Game 5 or Game 6. What downtown Toronto would be like? I mean, I couldn't even imagine. I think God forbid they actually win. I mean, people would lose
yeah.
their years. You've been waiting, right?
100%. So after ESPN, what got you into movie podcast? And
So
this
it
was
was while
2016, you said?
I was at ESPN. So I was at ESPN from 2010 to 2019. And then I was filling in all the ESPN radio shows. And my friend Dan Stanzik and I would always do a lot of shows together. He's a great, great producer. He's still there. And I said, maybe I should pitch them on a podcast. He said, yeah, all the stuff that you're interested in. You love baseball, you love hockey, you love tennis. movies, et cetera. And I said, why don't we just do movies? He said, okay, that sounds like a good idea. And I said, titles, and I said, maybe movie geek, movie freak. He's like, yeah. And I said, Cinephile. He goes, oh, that's great. Cinephile's a good name. So Pete Genesini, I'm always indebted to. He was one of the executives there at ESPN Radio, and Dan and I just did like a pilot episode, and it wasn't great. I was kind of rushed, but Dan goes, no, let's just do it, put it out there and see what happens. And Pete said he liked it. He gave a little bit of feedback, but he thought it was pretty good. So as you know, whenever you're in a big corporation, the most important thing is to kind of use the resources that are available to you. Meaning, because of the four letters at ESPN, I was able to attract a lot of talent and a lot of interviews, which are now in the book. So that wouldn't be available to me if I was just podcasting as I am right now in my basement. When you're at ESPN, because it's ESPN, you're going to get certain actors who are going to speak to you. So 2016, we started it. And of course, we have great talent bookers, Katie Mirvalda, so many others who would pitch these publicists, would you like to come on this podcast? And, it's 15, 20 minutes of their time. As you know, from the junkets, they're doing a bunch of these anyways. So you just add ESPN to the list. Sure. And that's really the crux of the book that I wanted to go back to. A lot of those interviews in 2016. Will Arnett was my first guest speaking of the Leafs. Obviously, giant Leafs fan, fellow Toronto guy. From there it was J.K. Simmons, Miles Teller. The holy grail for me was Robert De Niro. I got to meet Bob, interview him. Pacino I met separately. It wasn't related to Cinephile, but I adore Pacino, obviously. And then Margot Robbie and all these other great actors. So it was really because of ESPN's access I was able to do it. I did 78 episodes of Cinephile for ESPN. Lost my job, went to Cadence 13, which was a podcast company, and said, can I continue the podcast? And they said, sure. We actually need someone to host an NFL podcast. If you do the NFL podcast with a guy named Michael Lombardi, we'll let you do the movie podcast. So 78 episodes at ESPN. I continued on with Cadence 13 for another 100 plus, I think. So I'm really grateful to them. Great team over there. And then this podcast ended because Mike ended up getting a job. He's now with Bill Belichick running UNC football. So GM Shuffle ends NFL podcast. Cinephile no longer has a home. My friend Dan Lebitard, who I worked with at ESPN, now is running his own company called Meadowlark Media. He says, I'd love to hire you. I said, great. So then the final 100, maybe almost 200 episodes I did for Meadowlark. And then the podcast ended last September. Dan called me last May. I said, I got bad news, buddy. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to keep your podcast. I said, no problem. He said, we're basically getting rid of a lot of these podcasts. We're just really streamlining it down to my show, a couple other shows, and that's it. So my agent looked around for a home elsewhere, couldn't find one. So I said, all right, I did it for a few months, actually. Dan said, if you want to keep it going, I can't pay you, but if you just want to keep the podcast going for fun, so you can end it on your own terms, which I thought was nice. So I still get to interview some sportscasters who I really like, Joe Buck, Ian Eagle, et cetera, and a few other actors along the way. So last September of 2004 was my final episode. So 336 episodes over 8 years, 3 different companies. So I'm really grateful. And I thought the book would be a nice thank you to all the fans who listen to the podcast. At one point, there was 40,000 listening. I thought it'd be nice for them to be able to go back and read some of these interviews. And even I have close friends who have no idea about some of these interviews. I didn't know you talked to Willem Dafoe. I didn't know you spoke to Mahershala Ali. So I included all those in the book, and I hope people enjoy it.
That's amazing, man. And would you ever reconsider down the road going back to that podcast?
Probably not. The only way I would do it, my main aversion to it, I just don't think movies are as good as they once were. Now that I don't have to do the podcast, like when I was doing the podcast, I always felt there was an emphasis to have at least one new movie every week. Then I'd have an old movie, and then I'd have a wild card. So I'd have a guest or whatever interest I had. So the pressure became like during Oscar season. It's great. I'm a member of the Film Critics Association, Broadcast Film Critics Association. So I get the screeners sent to me, physical copy or via email. So at that point, it's easy, right? I can watch 3 movies a week. I can watch The Brutalist. I can watch, any of these films that are coming out. It's easy. But in the summer months, I found it to be a real drag because a lot of the films just weren't interesting to me or appealing to me. And I have found it in the last year of not having to do the weekly podcast. It's really been great because I get to go watch all these great films on Criterion. I get to watch movies on HBO Max and a lot of movies from the past. Gene Hackman passes away, and I can go watch Night Moves, which I'd never seen, which is a really cool movie from the 70s. I can indulge in, the Royal Tenenbaums or French Connection, whatever it might be. So that's really fun. I've got 4 kids. I don't have a lot of time. Obviously, I have an actual job with MLB Network and NHL Network. I have a part-time job with Amazon as well, doing hockey for them, Amazon Prime, where I travel to Canada every Monday during the hockey season. So I'm pretty busy. So my free time, I think it's nice to be able to go back and watch There Will Be Blood or, Serpico or any of those great films I love of the past. I just don't have the inkling to watch new movies. I will on occasion. I love Spike Lee, so I just went and saw Highest to Lowest, the new Denzel Washington movie. I liked it a lot. Again, it's a remake of Kurosawa's High and Low, which, as you know, is one of the great movies of all time. So this is a tough movie to remake. And I just watched High and Low again before going to see it. But I enjoyed it for what it was. It's great to see Spike and Denzel together again. But generally, yeah, most new movies I'm just not that interested in. And people listen within movies know that. In the book, I talk about that. Barry Jenkins said to me with Moonlight, in the past, you'd have these mid-tier pictures. This as a director, you'd have these quiz shows and ordinary people. And now it's either a $2 million movie or a $200 million movie, right? That they make less movies. A lot of them are tentpoles. A lot of them are IP. So I just don't have much interest in a lot of new movies. The only way I would revamp Cinephile is if I could do what Bill Simmons does. He very smartly has a podcast called The Rewatchables, in which he talks about old movies from the past and they rewatch them. So if someone said to me, you could do a Rewatchables type podcast and you can discuss these movies you're watching, that's really the only way I could see myself wanting to do it.
And I completely get that because when I started this podcast, for the longest time, it was all like older films, specifically targeted DreamWorks, and then it kind of became like everything else. Here and there, I'll talk about the new stuff, like Jurassic World that came out. I had a production designer on, but 99% of the time, the connection that I have with the older films, and I think you would appreciate that, is something like it's kind of like ingrained in you. You know, like you've grown up with it and you've come to love all these films, and there's different types of storytelling involved, right? And characters and actors. And yeah, the new stuff, I mean, not even for the podcast, like in general, like, okay, I'm not interested. But, you know, I don't know if you ever seen I've never seen Yellowstone, but I just saw the spin-off of it, 1923, which if you have you seen it?
I haven't, but here's the other issue. So back when we were growing up, people always say, what's the last movie you saw? What are you going to go see this weekend? Now what they say is, what show are you binging? What's good on Netflix? Another reason that I'm so disconnected from what people are doing, because I never watch Netflix. I don't watch shows. Now there's exceptions, of course. I love The Sopranos. I love Breaking Bad. I like Succession, but generally I don't watch these shows. I just don't have the interest. And it's for a very, very simple reason. Since time is scarce, I'd rather watch a 2-hour movie rather than an 8-hour limited series or, God forbid, 20 episodes, whatever it may be. I just find that more satisfying and appealing to me. I played tennis with a friend of mine the other day. So you have to watch The Waterfront. I said, what's that? I looked it up. I said, no, there's no chance. Why? I said, it's an 8-episode limited series. That's 8 hours of my time. I'm not going to do that. I could just watch a 2-hour movie. I could watch Do the Right Thing again and I'd feel great. I don't have the time. So I just don't have the time or the inclination, I should say. So my wife is younger than me. She'll watch shows. She binge watches. I know that's the way the world has gone. But oftentimes this happens. People tell you should watch Yellowstone or watch these shows. And I go, I just don't have the interest. I don't have the bandwidth.
Right. No, fair enough. And I'm not much of a TV show watcher either, but 1923 is something that if you do get a chance to watch it's 15 episodes. It's an amazing series, extremely character driven, super long scenes. You're completely involved from the first episode until the last episode. But yeah, I mean, I like 5 seasons. I think the last series that I ever watched was more than one season was Better Call Saul. That's about it. And Breaking Bad, right? But yeah, no, I get it, man. I totally get it. So in your book, you know, you talked about your interviews with Robert De Niro, with Al Pacino, and then you talked about other actors. Can you can you highlight some of the conversations that you had with any of the actors from a 2 point of views? A, just the excitement as a movie fan of being able to talk to these people, but out of these conversations, what did you learn something that was about yourself that you didn't know before existed?
Well, the De Niro one is fascinating. To me, it's one of the centerpieces of the book. And again, the book is available wherever books are sold. So go to your Barnes & Noble, Mango Publishing, whatever you like. What I found interesting with De Niro was, I was at the Little League World Series doing my actual job at Williamsport, Pennsylvania. So it's about a 5-hour drive from Connecticut. And again, one of the talent bookers, Katie, got a hold of me and said, De Niro's coming. He's promoting a boxing movie called Hands of Stone. And I know De Niro's not much of a sports fan. So I said, okay, he's only doing this because it's a boxing movie, ESPN, et cetera. So I said, I'll be there. So I worked until 7 or 8 that night. And then my wife and I, we had 2 boys at the time. We have 4 now. We drove back. I remember my boss saw me in the hotel and he starts laughing. What are you doing? Like, he just sees me in my entourage. And I said, what? We're going to go interview De Niro. He just starts laughing. He's like, have fun. So we drove back 5 hours in the middle of the night. And my main thing I kept saying to myself was, his name is Robert De Niro, but nobody ever calls him Robert. Everyone always calls him Bob. Mr. De Niro sounds a little too formal, but I don't want to just call him Bob out of the gate. So my friend Tim Kirchner, who's a fellow broadcaster, does a great job on ESPN on baseball, said, you can just ask him. I said, that's a good idea. So I got back, and then the next morning, my wife and I get up, and she loves De Niro like I do. So we dropped the kids off at the neighbors and went into ESPN. And, obviously there's lots of butterflies, lots of emotion. It's like talking to somebody who you deeply respect and admire. And I have some ideas in my head. I always jot down a few things. I had a 5-hour drive, so I got to think of different things I wanted to ask him. But again, it's 15 minutes, which, as you know, they definitely fly by. But when he turned the corner, I said, "Oh my God, it's like a surprise party." He almost was, "Oh my God, get down. Here he is." And he came in, and honestly, Jawad, he was so sweet. He just had a big smile on his face. As I described in the book, he was very avuncular. He's just like a very sweet guy, resembling an uncle, long flowing hair. And I think, De Niro is famously taciturn. When I said to him there was no camera, I think he loosened up a little bit. Like I think he was appreciative of that. Like a podcast is just me and him. We didn't have
Yeah.
any. And basically, what I found is I wanted to ask him questions he wasn't going to be asked. There's somebody that day asked him, what's your favorite movie of yours? And I said, that's the worst question you can ask an actor or a director or a screenwriter. Because I said, every project is so personal to them. Like you face it a different way and say, which project are you fond of, or which one did you have a real personal attack? Like, that's okay. When you say a favorite movie, like, I don't know, like they come for different reasons. By the way, he did answer the question. He said, I like Raging Bull and I like Midnight Run, which is pretty funny. I know Raging Bull is one of his favorites, but I'm glad he included Midnight Run, which is obviously a great comedy. So I said, okay, I'm not going to ask him that stuff. I don't want to ask him the generic stuff. I have to ask him about the movie which he's promoting, which I watched, which was okay. It was, so I said, what do I do? So the approach I took was I asked him first about Tribeca, because I had a Tribeca shirts. Okay, he knows I'm a big fan, whatever. I asked him about, for a guy who's such a private guy, this is a very public festival. How did it first begin? You and Jane Rosenthal. He basically gave Jane most of the credit. The next question I asked him was when I said, no one else is going to ask him this question today. I asked him about the documentary he did about his dad. And I said, again, for a guy who's so private and so famously remote, you really dedicate a lot of time to telling the story about your dad. It's a fascinating documentary on HBO, and your dad was a famous painter. That got Bob talking a little bit about that. And I said, okay, at the very least, he'll appreciate that I'm asking him questions that no one else is asking him, and hope it's personal to him. From there, I started talking about my favorite movies of his, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, Goodfellas. And again, time runs short. You tell a few jokes, et cetera, but we get through it. At the end of the interview, he turns to me and says, Pakistan. I said, yeah, because when I asked him about Taxi Driver, I said, it's one of my favorite movies. And yet, I'm the son of Pakistani immigrants. I was born in Toronto. I was born in 78. The movie came out in 76. I've got no personal attachment to Travis Bickle, who's some guy from Oklahoma and New York that I was related to the character because it's about loneliness and urban alienation. And so Bob's remembered this at the end of the interview. He goes, Pakistan. I said, yeah. He goes, there's a great article about the Hindu Kush. It's like the lost tribes of Pakistan. And he goes, it's really interesting. I read it recently. And he goes, if you have trouble finding it, let me know. And I'm laughing, thinking, I'm just going to email him. Like, oh, yeah, let me know. Where was that article, Bob? So anyways, I thank him and his friend Stan. By the way, most of these people, as you know, have entourages. Bob came with one person. His friend Stan was a very nice guy who thanked me after and said that was a great interview. You did an awesome job. I said, thanks so much. My wife and I later, by the way, on campus saw Bob walking with Stan. Kind of give us a friendly wave. Like, you're still in awe. You can't believe it's Robert De Niro. And I was able to kind of manage the adrenaline during the interview because I had so much I wanted to ask him. It really only hit me once the interview was over. Then you're kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm sitting with Robert De Niro. I thankfully got a couple of pictures. I made him laugh. I have a picture of him laughing. What I said was, I love Don Rickles' line. He said, I had dinner with De Niro once. It was like having dinner alone. So that got a chuckle out of Bob because he was so famously quiet. And that was it. So I dropped my wife back home. I've got to get back to Williamsport, Pennsylvania for my actual job working for ESPN. It's a 5-hour drive. As I'm driving, there's an email that came and said, from RDN's office. And I said, there's only one RDN. So I pulled over and it just said, hi, this is the article that Bob mentioned that he wanted you to read. Really enjoyed spending time with you. And I said, that is unbelievable. I've interviewed hundreds of athletes and actors and entertainers. Normally, they're all very polite. Once the interview ends, they shake your hand, they thank you, and that's it. And it's exceptionally rare that any of them ask them anything about you. You mentioned hockey and hockey of a certain era. Paul Coffey I interviewed, who's the assistant coach of the Oilers. I interviewed him back in November, and I was surprised. Either beginning or at the end of the interview, he asked something about me. That never happens. Normally, you ask the questions, they thank you, you leave. So he said, oh, where are you from? I said, I'm from Kingston. He said, oh, yeah, Kingston. Yeah, okay, great. Frontenac fan, OHL. Like, it was just, it's unusual to me because normally they don't do it. And I get it. They've got things to do. There's other jobs. The fact that De Niro actually took an interest in me, that on that chopper back to Tribeca, at some point he told his assistant, hey, make sure you get that guy's email and make sure you find that article. He would enjoy that. I was floored by it, and it's something I will always appreciate. It tells you a few things about him. One, his attention to detail. One, he's conscientious. And three, he's very well read. This was an article he just happened to come across in the New York Times. Robert De Niro is an Italian-American, Irish bloodlines. What does he care about Pakistan? But he read this article. He remembered it. Very, very cool. The article, by the way, if you want to look it up, it's called The Lost Tribes of the Hindu Kush. Very, very cool.
I will. That's such a cool story. I mean, I've heard some great things about Robert De Niro. Obviously, he's a fantastic actor, but to me personally, he's done some amazing work. But I think the one that stands out for me the most, because in my opinion, the most different, is King of All Comedy by Martin Scorsese and with Jerry Lewis. I don't know if you've seen that.
I'm so glad you mentioned it. So I've seen it. Don't worry, I've seen every single Scorsese movie. So I said to him, that was one of the interviews. You know what? We actually didn't talk about Goodfellas. We did talk King of Comedy, and I told him how much I loved it. And I said, I love the scene where Jerry Lewis is on the phone, and then he's walking, and the woman asked him for his autograph. He says, "No, I can't right now." And she said, "I hope you get cancer." I said, such a funny line to me. That's so expressive of the way people can be. And De Niro said, well, that actually happened to Jerry. And so he ad-libbed that and told Marty we should put it in the film. And as Bob said to me, he goes, oftentimes there's the films that I want to make, I would bring them to Marty. And there's the films that Marty would bring to me. King of Comedy is something that I wanted to do. And it worked for us because they were really famous after Raging Bull. You know, prior to that, people knew who they were, obviously movie people. But now it's like, Raging Bull was nominated for Best Picture. De Niro had one Best Actor. He now won 2 Oscars, a very rarefied air. So he said, now we were being treated as celebrities and being treated a certain way. And they just loved the dark comedy and really resonated to it. And again, Bob doesn't use words. He's not very expressive. Marty's obviously much more expressive, and they use their camera to tell their stories. But I told him King of Comedy is one of my favorite De Niro Scorsese movies. And I think you're right. At the time, you know, Marty's told the story. In 83, the movie did not do well. It was a big bomb. He said he was going out to a New Year's Eve party with Jay Cox, his dear friend. And he said Entertainment Tonight was on. He said, now it's time for one of the biggest bombs of the year, King of Comedy. And he said, oh, man, I can't escape this movie. But over time, people really do love the movie, particularly people with a good sense of humor, comedies. As a matter of fact, a film that I hated, Joker, is highly influenced by the movie. Todd Phillips basically said he was mashing up King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, and that movie made $1 billion, and Joaquin Phoenix inexplicably won an Oscar for his rampant overacting. But that's an example of a movie where, hey, years from now, that's impacted filmmakers from today. I'm sure Todd Phillips is a good guy. I love The Hangover as much as anybody. But my point is, that's a movie, to your point. Not that, you know, you're right to say to me, I don't know if you've seen it, because not enough people have seen it, but those who have really love it. Scott Rogowski is a dear friend of mine. He's a great comedian. When I asked him favorite Scorsese movie, immediately he said King of Comedy. It's a great, great film, and I agree with him.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in Joker, there was even De Niro was in it, you know, with that little kind of like a tribute. But I'm just curious. I understand why people didn't like Joker too. Why didn't you like Joker?
I just thought it was so derivative of the originals, like the Scorsese movies. To me, it just felt like so obvious that he was cribbing from Main Streets and Taxi Driver. It didn't have anything original to say. And like I said, I thought his overacting was particularly notable. Like I don't like when actors, and as I always just say, it's called best actor, not most actor. And I just thought he was doing a lot in terms of the idiosyncrasies and the tics, and there was zero subtlety to the film. And I thought it was a very unpleasant experience. I had that also with a movie called Split, which I know a lot of people liked. The M. Night Shyamalan movie. Again, trying to support him like you and me. He's brown, but I remember hating Split and just thinking, man, this McAvoy guy's doing way too much.
So,
It felt
I mean,
like he's doing like 20 different roles. And I go, you know, I like it when an actor is a little more measured and subtle. You know, in the book, I have a great chapter on Paul Giamatti. He's one of my favorite actors. Like I love Paul Giamatti. I love Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like I love those character actors. Right? Oftentimes they're not the leading stars. But yeah, I really didn't like Joker, which I know is an unpopular opinion. Obviously, he won an Oscar for it. It made $1 billion. I have like one cousin who said to me, I'm really happy you disliked Joker, because I did too. But I know most people did like the movie.
I think for a lot of people, including myself, the whole thing with Joker was, aside from those references, was it kind of showed how a person goes from something being normally decent and then being bullied and becoming something completely evil. And I think that's kind of like how The Godfather was, you know, like they show the human side of the dark side. And I feel that's what people resonated with. You know, you talked about Split. I wasn't into Split until the last scene, like when the music kicked in, and I've seen that scene so many times, how his personality splits from one mirror to another, and then the reveal at the end. And that's what did it for me. Like, other than that, the movie was okay, but that ending completely made up for the film, because not because he's brown. M. Night Shyamalan, like, you know, Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs, Village, Happening. I mean,
I really
those.
I liked his first 3 out of the gate. Like I really liked Sixth Sense, obviously Unbreakable. I probably liked even more. I like Signs. Since then, I can't say I've loved any of his movies. I thought I hated The Village. Um,
Really?
I thought it was terrible. It was just so ponderous. And then you get to the ending, you go, okay, yeah, guess what? We're not in 1830s. These are present day. I've just, he's been too much of a one-trick pony for me. And I was really excited. He had the one, I think, what was it called? The Visitor or something like that. The old people. It was supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's okay. He had the one on the beach. I thought was terrible. Now I've just accepted it. I don't know why I keep watching movies. I'm just going to.
I kind of stopped with him. I would say The Happening, which
Yeah.
I know a lot of people didn't like. Um, I did, and then the recently Sandra Bullock film that came out during the COVID, what was it called? Where they have to wear a blindfold,
God.
which borrowed pretty much everything from The Happening. Literally, it was just like a different concept, but everything was the same.
I'm sure that
Um,
happens to you sometimes because this happened to me. I really liked Lady in the Water, and no one liked.
yes,
I thought maybe it's just because I love Giamatti so much; he was the lead role. And then I tried watching it again, and I couldn't get through it. So I don't know if it's actually good because I liked it when I saw it, or I was everyone else is right and it's a terrible movie. I'm not sure, but I did like it at the time.
but I will say this: his most recent film with the one with the serial killer at the concert. I mean, absolutely garbage.
I didn't.
One of the biggest mistakes he made, and he casted his own daughter as a singer, and she did not know how to act. Like aside from it was just terrible. Aside from the ending, how it was revealed, okay, it was okay, but that her and she had a major role. She was like almost like a supporting actress. It was not that she was singing; she's a singer by profession, but she was acting, and it was a disaster. I don't know why he went that direction. Maybe launching her, whatever, but still, it ruined the movie for me.
That's interesting. I'll know to avoid it. Her name is Suleika Knight, and the movie is called Trap, which came out last.
Trap, yeah, yeah, came out last year. And you won an Emmy. Tell me that story. When the nomination happened and when you won, like that feeling, and was there a sense of surprise at the nomination and the victory, and just the emotional element of it, how that went through?
Sure. So I tell the story about working the Oscars. So me and Ben Lyons, so I'm so indebted to. Ben was the one who wanted to work with me and got me the Oscars. We won an Emmy for our Oscars coverage. So basically, what we did was a second screen experience. So if you're watching the Academy Awards, as everyone is watching with Jimmy Kimmel hosting, remember, if you went to Facebook Live or Oscar.com, you could see me and Ben and Sophia Carson, who's gone on to a wonderful career. She actually sang at the Oscars a couple of years ago. And Troy Gentile, who's a great guy who was on the show The Goldberg. So the four of us are talking throughout the show. So whoever the award winner would be, Best Supporting Actor Sam Rockwell, we'd be talking about Three Billboards, that's in Ebbing, Missouri, Rockwell's career, et cetera. So for that one, we won an Emmy. And honestly, it almost sounds like a made up Emmy. It's like, best technological insight within a creative, whatever. Like, so we won the Emmy, but like it's a piece of paper. It's not like a physical Emmy, but we did win it. The next year we were nominated, didn't win it. So the Emmy that's actually behind me, which I did win for, is for MLB Network. So, 2019, I lost my job at ESPN, got hired by MLB Network into Zone. And so MLB Network at that time was, obviously a great network if you love baseball, and they had success in terms of winning Emmys, particularly for this flagship show called MLB Tonight. So the first nomination I got was in 2020, which is the Gold Banner. So I was there, I think my second year, and we got nominated, which was great. And then I was there a couple of years later. We got nominated for the second one. And that was the one which was 2 years ago. And I said to my boss, I said, listen, I've never won an Emmy, a true Emmy. I'd love to go to the awards. And he says, we're not going to win. We've won in the past. I think MLB Tonight won 6 times over a 12-year span. He said, but people's perceptions change, things change. Now it's NFL shows that are dominating more than baseball. ESPN might win for Sports Center. But if you really want to go, you can go. So I said, great. So I get to put on my tux, which I still fit from my years ago working the Oscars with Ben back in 2016. And it was great just to be able to be there with my friends and all the producers that worked on the show. So the category for which we were nominated was Best Daily Studio Show. And the other nominees were all ESPN shows. And while there, I got to catch up. My buddy John Fisher is a great researcher at CBS. I got to see him. I got to meet Joe Buck, who's one of my favorite broadcasters. Now works at ESPN. At the time, was working at Fox. So it was nice just to hobnob, say hello. Ian Eagle, I'm a huge fan of at CBS. I got to say hello to him, meet him and his son. So as far as the award ceremony, I'm sure you've been to award ceremonies. Now I realize why everyone is so annoyed and why they're so happy to be hammered at the Golden Globes, although I don't drink. It's because it can be rather long and laborious. You're just waiting for your moment. And MLB Network was only nominated for 2 categories, one of which was ours. So they're going through it. And at one point I turned to Chris Rolenbeck, my friend, our coordinating producer, and I said, if we don't win, this has been a colossal waste of time. Like I'm glad I'm here to do this once. But I said, God, this is like 3 hours. I could be at home with my kids. I could be working. I could be at a movie. Like this is just like, and it's very specific, much like the Oscars, best live action short. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Similarly, this is a sports Emmy award. So it's, best teases, best post-production, best Super Bowl editing. Like it's very specific stuff. And most speeches are fine. Everyone goes up there. But again, you really don't care unless it's involving you. So our category was the second last of the night because obviously it's for the best. So we get up there and they do the nominees. And at that point, I was resigned that we weren't going to win. I'd been praying so hard, like every Salat, I was like, I got to get one of these. I kept praying ever since we got nominated. But in that moment, I said, no, it's going to be NFL Live. And I kind of had the expression on my face, like my hand in my cheek. Look, I was ready to applaud. Again, I know all those ESPN people are all my friends. Laura Rutledge is the host. She does a heck of a job. Scott Van Pelt was there. He is one of the hosts of SportsCenter. So I said, okay, it's probably going to be NFL Live for SportsCenter. I'll be happy and I can go home after this. And he actually messed up the host. He's a great guy, the Kid Mero, who's a very funny comedian. Him and who said that sketch comedy show. The Kid Mero, you're supposed to say the Emmy goes to. He said the MLB goes to. It was a dead. It was a dead giveaway that we won because we were the only MLB show. We were the only baseball show. So he said the MLB goes to, and I yelled. I'm like, yeah! I let a big scream, and then he opens it, the MLB Tonight, MLB Network, and I gave a fist bump, and he's reacting to me. If you see the video, because I'm the one screaming, and yelling. He's like, yeah, like kind of laughing. And then Mark Heifel, my boss, came down. I gave him a hug, and we all walked down together. And a few of my friends said, "Are you going to talk?" Or my wife. I said, "No." I said, the talent always gets to talk. I get to talk every day on television. I want everyone else to talk. So my boss got to talk, Mark Heifel, who's a phenomenal guy. He loves Scorsese like me. He loves Goodfellas. It's his favorite movie. So Mark talked for a few minutes, and then one of our producers, Chris Rollenbeck, who's been there forever, he spoke. I said, I just want to be on the stage, which they allowed me to do. So I have a nice picture of Mark talking on the stage, and then I'm standing there with a couple of producers. So I said, I just want to be on the stage. That's enough for me. And obviously, the adrenaline is pumping through our veins. It's a career highlight. If you work in television, you work in broadcasting, you dream of winning an Emmy. Just as an actor, would dream of winning an Oscar. And it's very nice because it wasn't individual. It's for our entire show. So that's the producers, the directors, the lighting people, the audio people, the makeup, the analysts. So it's a really team effort. And backstage, we were so thrilled. We just kept hugging and grabbing each other and jumping up and down. And Mark kept laughing. He said, it's like the Stanley Cup. Each person gets to hold it for a minute. We give it to the next person. So then I called my wife and FaceTime and said, hey, we won. And she was like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, alhamdulillah, I can't believe we won. I was so happy. And I was overjoyed, for forever now. When people, I go on shows, introduce me, they always say Emmy Award winner. Every time you smile, every time it's nice. I joke to people, I said, you think that you're in this just for the award itself, but you love the external recognition. Of course, who wouldn't want to have one? There's a great book by, his name escapes me, but I'll remember it. It was basically interviews with like 25 different Oscar winners. And I can't remember who it was. It might have been, it was now, but she said like she willed it to happen. And I felt the same way. I was like, I just kept visualizing we're going to win. Then we won. I kind of felt like, yeah, it was kind of destined to happen. It was bound to happen. Meryl Streep tells a great story. She has 3 Oscars, as you know. She said, I always keep one in the main room because when people walk in, they always say, where are your Oscars? And I show them, there's one right there. And they always want to grab it. And they always want to make a speech. And I said, yeah, of course, go ahead, make your speech. A lot of actors keep it in the bathroom for the same reason. They go, they want to grab it, make a speech to themselves in the mirror. I'm like, yep, I totally get it. So it's really a fun thing. I have it in my office. I'm scared the kids will break it, but I keep it here. And like I said, it's a team effort. It's something I'll always appreciate. I'll never forget. And I'm proud of the other nominations, by the way. We didn't win last year. We still got nominated. So I still have a plaque for last year's nomination. Last year, we did lose to NFL Live. We thought we'd lose to 2 years ago. But the fact I've got 3 nominations and 1 win, I'm obviously so grateful. And alhamdulillah, it's all worked out. Post ESPN. I never won an Emmy at ESPN, but I won one since then. So it's been really, really cool.
That's cool, man. That's really good. Good for you. Where do you get all your energy from? I'm just
well, it's funny. My eldest son Yusuf always laughs because people ask him, how much coffee does your dad drink? And I said, no, I don't drink coffee. And they're like, what? He's like, yeah, I don't like coffee. As you know, being brown, we like a good cup of chai. I only have that like at the masjid. I never have chai at home. I never drink tea. Generally, I'm just fired up and ready to go. I don't know what to tell you. I try to get to the gym, exercise regularly. That burns off some energy, gives you some energy. Yeah. Again, with 4 kids, I'm always pretty amped up. I always got something to do, always running out for the next thing. But yeah, no coffee, no stimulants, just high on life, as they say.
No, that's good because, going to the gym helps, but obviously there's a natural personality and tendency about you that sort of sits and resides in you. And I'm sure you have your downtimes, but it's good to see that because that energy really, especially what you do, it's mandatory. Right? It's absolutely mandatory. So it's kind of a nice marriage between your personality and what you do.
Oh, it's a great point. As you said, you've talked to actors, directors, writers, production designers. Like, I think it's a surprise sometimes for people who are not in the business that, that actor was quieter than I thought or more reserved. And I'm like, listen, you can't be at a 10 all the time. Otherwise you'd be insane. So but I agree with you. There has to kind of be in you that you're able to flip the switch if need be. So, before I go do a show 4 or 5 days a week, it's not like it takes me so much energy to ramp up. It's like, no, it's just a little bit of a click of the dial, so to speak. I've been on TV now for 23 years. So at this point, it's secondhand.
Yeah.
Really amped up. And as you know, with anything, for you as a filmmaker, for you as a podcaster, the first year is always the hardest, right? The hardest part is kind of just finding your voice, finding your way. Once you're kind of is. And, a friend of mine, Steve Cooley, said years ago, he said, Ernie Harwell is a great broadcaster, Detroit Tigers. He said, whenever you start something new, you're always going to get criticized. The other guy was better. This guy stinks. He sucks. But after 5 years, It doesn't matter if they like you or they hate you. They just get used to you. So that's kind of been my motto too. Like I'm sure there's people, and I appreciate the compliment that say, "Oh, I like your energy, I like your style." I'm sure there's other people who say I find them grating or overbearing. At the end of the day, you do it for long enough. Doesn't matter if they like you or hate you. They just get used to
That's all it is. It's about doing it for yourself and doing what you enjoy, and that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, there'll be people who will criticize you, nevertheless, and that's just life. That's just part of it.
it. Yeah.
And now that your career has spanned over so many years with so much success, um, and I hope it continues. Have you ever considered going into writing or directing a film?
So it's funny. A friend of mine, I wouldn't even call him a friend, just somebody who kind of reached out to me on Twitter. He was a big fan of the podcast that I found. He said, "I want to send you a script." And I said, "I don't like. I'm not Robert Downey. Or like, what do you want to be a script doctor? This thing, like it's Jonathan. Like I can't do that." He said, "No, you must have written a script before." I said, "I've never written a screenplay." He said, "Really?" I said, "I think I wrote a teleplay back in college for Oz, which was one of my favorite shows. Like that was script writing class, but I've never written like an original screenplay, an adapted screenplay." I said, it seems like a ton of work. It seems overbearing and overwhelming, and I don't know how to do it. I don't want to take a course and kind of figure out how to do it. So the only dream that I had for years was to write a book, which I've now done. So that's done. I wrote a book of fiction, which has long been a passion project. I wrote that back in 2014. I feel like Stanley Kubrick working on this thing for 12 years, but I've chipped away at it, chipped away at it, chipped away at it. Eventually, that book will come out. Those are really the two big things for me. I wanted to write one book about Cinephile. I wanted to get this fiction book published, which is about a Muslim baseball player, which, like I said, I really poured my heart into. And who knows, maybe it'll come out and 5 people will read it, but that's okay. But I'd never had any inkling of wanting to make a movie or write a screenplay. The only thing I will say, and I put this in the book, people often ask me, if you could make a movie, what would you make? So I always say, if someone just gave me $20 million, I can make a film. The fiction film I'd make would be about Roberto Clemente, the great pirate superstar, Puerto Rican. He was the first great Hispanic baseball athlete, but really was known as a humanitarian. There's a reason why Roberto Clemente Award exists. It exists to that player every year who extends themselves on a humanitarian level. Roberto Clemente, for those who don't know, again, was the first great Puerto Rican baseball player, played for the Pirates in the 60s and 70s. But more importantly, he died in 1972 because he flew on a mission after there's an earthquake in Nicaragua to help and give supplies to help those in need. And the plane, unfortunately, was not found. Clemente's body was never found. So in addition to being a pioneer for Latin baseball players, and you see how the Latinization of the sport right now, it's incredible how many great Latin players and fans there are. But Clemente was that first great player. And I always feel like if I could market it, there's a huge Hispanic population in America. I could reach out to Puerto Rican friends I have, et cetera, market it a certain way. And it'd be a great baseball movie, but also a great humanitarian story. And the nonfiction film I'd always make if I had any sort of money would be called Places of Worship. And I always thought as a religious person, religion can get denigrated and made fun of. In Religulous, the Bill Maher movie, other examples, as you know, but negative portrayals of Islam. The Apostle is one of my favorite movies. I mentioned the book, the great Robert Duvall movie. I met Duvall briefly in '98. I was in college, second year at Ryerson. He was there throwing up the first pitch of the Blue Jays game. One of my friends had tipped me off. He said, "I know how much you love The Apostle. He's going to be at like Planet Hollywood." I mean, it was literally a 3-second exchange. I think I literally just shook his hand and go, "I love The Apostle. You're a great man, great filmmaker, great actor." Obviously, Tom Hagen is one of the great actors of all time. But what I love about The Apostle is that Duvall showed that like a religious person can be a normal person, a flawed, three-dimensional, but like it's an extraordinary movie. And I talked to Billy Bob Thornton about it. That interview is in the book. And I told Billy Bob how much I love The Apostle. Yeah, I love that movie too. It's one of those that are kind of like for you, a King of Comedy. Like now that people have seen it, but they see it, they go, "Oh yeah, The Apostle, it's a great movie." So anyways, Places of Worship. I think it'd be a great documentary to go to places of worship in the world. Like go to Gurdwara for Sikhs, go to see the Pope, go to see Jerusalem and talk to rabbis, and of course end up in Mecca and obviously talk to Azur. Like I think it would be amazing to just make a film which is like embracing religion, embracing commonalities rather than separation. That's really the movie that I always wanted.
That's incredible, man. That's incredible. It's interesting. I was for the last 4 years, I developed this little project, but it was not like specifically on all religions. It was more about pillars.
Yeah.
The 5 pillars of Islam, and just kind of like worked around a story around it for a documentary series. It's been 5 years of trying to get it off the ground. But that whole thing of religion, I think, is so necessary. Not because necessarily, you have to worship somebody or that's fine, but it's just more about after you hit a certain age in your life, and I don't care who you are, you feel something inside you that you never felt before, whatever the reason for that is.
Yeah.
And it's very necessary for your own growth and existence.
Julia Phillips, who is the great crazy producer, won an Oscar for The Sting, co-produced Taxi Driver. Eventually, her career flamed out because of way too much cocaine and way too much partying. Wrote one of the all-time great Hollywood books. It's called "You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again." And in it, she talked about after she had gotten over the drugs and she was trying to get back into Hollywood and produce films. She said she noticed that everybody who was partying as she was in the 20s and 30s, they had done one of two things. Either they'd done what she had done, and she was vigilantly anti-religion, but went into more therapy and self-help, etc., or they had found religion. She goes, they either do one or the other. She goes, after you've been through all of that, either you go, I turn myself to God, or you do what she had done, which is I turn myself to self, but on a healthy level, existential level, whatever that may be. So whatever you want to call it, you kind of eventually have to kind of find your way to that once you're done with doing all the other stuff.
100%. So last question, what's the next mountain to climb, if any?
The big one's just to get the fiction book published, like I said, because I started in 2014. I did 3 drafts. I sent to a handful of editors, much like my sportscasting journey. Got turned down by a bunch, maybe 12 agents. I think one liked it, Josh Getzler. And he had actually owned a minor league baseball team of the Yankees. He's an Orthodox Jew. And he said, something I really liked about your book is you said, Jews have Sandy Koufax, who's a great baseball player. Muslims don't have one, so I didn't invent one. And I thought that would be a really interesting book. So Josh was really, really helpful. He said, let's get into the book. Let's work on it. I paid somebody a bunch of money to help edit me on the book. We sent it out to 12 different editors. 6 said, I really like the idea. I just don't think he's a good enough writer. 6 said, I think he's a really good writer. I just don't think the idea is very good. So there's no unanimity. Couldn't sell it. COVID happens. Kind of lost touch with Josh. And then my friend Scott Spinelli, who works at MLB Network, told me he self-published it. I told him about the book. He said, there's no reason you can't self-publish this. You've got 107,000 followers on Twitter. You've got people on Instagram. You're on television. Like, you can just self-publish it. He goes, I self-published, and I got 1,000 books sold. So I'm just a random guy. So you don't need to have Simon & Schuster do it. So I got back in touch with Josh a couple years ago, had dinner, said, what do you think? And naturally, I want to be cynical and say, because he's an agent, he said, don't self-publish, because obviously you can't get any money out of it.
Of course.
Let's do one more pitch on it. So I paid somebody an exorbitant amount of money to edit it again for me. He's a very bright guy, Mark Tavani, but it was more money than I wanted to spend. So I did another draft of it. This is a filmmaker. You do 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we're on to draft 5 or 6. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's in pretty good shape now. Josh sent it out in February. Have not gotten a yes. Haven't gotten a lot of no's, which Josh somehow seems to feel like, well, it's kind of lingering. And I think if it's been this long, they're not really interested. I mean, if someone... So I might have to do what Scott told me, which is self-publish. I have to shut up Mango Publishing because they're the ones that publish Cinephile. And they did like this fiction book. I said to me, he goes, no, I think it's good. Their only concern is they do primarily nonfiction, not fiction. But I think they've done a good job promoting this book, and they might actually end up being the ones publishing. But honestly, if I can just get that book published, that would be a Herculean accomplishment at this point for me.
Well, I hope that happens, and I hope that happens sooner than later, because I completely understand what you're trying to do. And, you talk about baseball. It's one of the things that came to my mind. I'll send you the link. The film 42?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I've had the guest several times, Don Burgess. He's a cinematographer. He's worked with Robert Zemeckis over the years. And I spoke to him about 42. You'll enjoy it. It's a great conversation. You being a baseball.
I love the fact with your podcast, you're not just interviewing actors, directors, front-facing talent. Like, I think those people are oftentimes the most fascinating. Like, I talked to a guy named Sam Wasson, who wrote a book about Chinatown. It's an unbelievable book. And Sam is like hyper energy. He's very exuberant. He's not what you think of as a writer, somebody who's dour or selling. Like, Sam is awesome. He had great stories about Nicholson and Polanski and Robert Town and Chinatown. And Barry Sonnenfeld's obviously very wacky, great director. He was funny. But I remember talking to Jack Fisk, who's a legendary production designer. I love Killers of the Flower Moon. As I told you how much I love Scorsese. I couldn't get Marty, but I got Jack Fisk, and I'm like, this was a blast. Like, he had such great stories. He worked with Terrence Malick and all those great movies like Badlands. This was his first film working with Scorsese. I talked to Ellen Lewis, who worked on casting for Killers of the Flower Moon. She also cast Goodfellas. She's cast like 7 Scorsese movies. So I applaud you for not just necessarily talking to the big names, the production designers, the cinematographers, the casting directors. Fascinating people to talk to. They've all got great stories.
They do. And I find so far, and I'm not trying to generalize, production designers, I find have very cool stories, especially, I forget his name. He worked on the new movie Horizon by Kevin Costner. He worked on the Wild film. And I had him on for 70 minutes. I probably spoke for 3 minutes.
Wow.
Like, he was just, and I love that because I don't need to talk because it's not about me, it's about you. And the fact that he had so many detailed stories is so cool. And one thing that I have learned I started this podcast 2.5 years ago, 356 episodes.
Eric,
Sorry?
Derek Hill is the guy's name.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes. I I always knew this. I mean, over the course of last 15, 20 years that filmmaking is a collaborative effort. But I truly believe that one of the reasons I ended up doing this podcast knowingly is learn how much more collaborative it is than I actually anticipated. Because everything is about freaking teamwork.
Yeah,
Everything,
yeah.
right? And that's one of the things that best thing you can do is you learn something from something that you're enjoying doing. And I absolutely love listening to these stories, and people love, being on the show, and win-win situation.
Yeah, I'm trying to look. I'm scouring quickly. I don't think I see among your books William Goldman, of course, the legendary screenwriter. I finally read his two books, which are very famously so legendary within screenwriting circles. And the one thing he says in there is that nobody knows anything, of course, because when it comes to these films, you never know how it's going to work out. And he won an Oscar for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid,
Yeah.
President's Men. But like all the President's Men was an exhausting process. It was very difficult. He's had the good fortune to work with Redford and Paul Newman. History's a great movie. He talked about doing other films with Clint Eastwood. Some of them work, some of them don't. But to your point, he really craps on the auteurist theory. He has this whole page where he goes, I hate this auteurist theory the French New Wave did. And a lot of people who are not in movies, they give an exorbitant amount of credit to the director. They always think the director did this, director did that. And he goes, there's 7 people in any movie. If you want to give them credit, it's the actors, it's the writer. Of course, it's a writer. Goldman's going to push for them. It's the cinematographer, it's the production designer, maybe it's the score, and the director. He goes, those are the 6 or 7. He goes, I get so tired of saying, oh, it's such a Spielbergian film. I go, no, maybe it was Janusz Kaminski, cinematographer. They always mention this person. Maybe it was John Williams. So he goes, it's a great frustration, I think, to people in movies, unless you're a director, because you're happy they get all the credit. You say there's way too much credit given to them. So I'm with you. It's a collaborative process. Anybody in the movies definitely knows that and appreciates that.
And being a director myself, one of the things that I'm working on a fiction that we're trying to get off the ground. It's called Whispers in Time, a short film about Palestine and Israel. And one of the things that I have come to learn, again, I knew this, but the director's job is only to talk to actors, and that's it. And obviously lead the team. Like, and other than that, if he or she doesn't know anything technicality, it's okay. It's fine. If he or she knows, that's good too. But just to be able to make the actors comfortable, that's the director's job, and get the best performance out of them and lead the rest of the team. Everybody else is so, casting, costume, production design, they're just so into it. And when I talk to these people, it's like the detail they talk to me about. It's like, again, I knew this, but it just blows my mind away that how much of effort it takes to freaking make a movie.
Yeah, well, think of your effort. As you said, it's been 5 years working on this documentary, trying to raise funding. I mean, there's no money in documentaries. I've talked to these documentary filmmakers, like Errol Morris I've talked to a couple of times in Cinephile, talked to Gabe Polsky. Like, these guys are just so dedicated, but there's something about nonfiction storytelling that draws them to it. You're not in it for the money. You're in it for the truth telling and the passion of it. So kudos to you and all those that do it, because it is certainly not easy.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. If you're in Toronto anytime soon, hit me up. We can get together for lunch or something. If you have time, that'd be really, really cool.
Yeah, inshallah, that'd be great, man. This was a ton of fun. Thanks so much for the support. And again, congrats on all you're doing. It's good to see another brown face who's as passionate and zealous about movies as me.